there was a moment, right before everything went wrong, when the lantern went out, and the whole room fell into a darkness so heavy it felt alive. Ethan, the youngest in our family, lay on the bed, not breathing right, not really seeing us anymore. We'd already watched one ghost child crawl out from under the floorboards, mouth sewn shut, eyes begging for help. But the worst part wasn't the child. It was what stood outside. Through the cracked window, we saw it. A tall, twisted shape waiting between the cotton rows, leaning closer and closer, as if it knew its moment had come. Grandma Mae shouted at us to hold Ethan down. She pressed a silver key, the kind that opens memories, not doors, onto the floor, and that's when the house itself began to open, split right down the middle, like an old wound tearing wide. From that darkness, voices rose, children whispering, crying, begging, and the collector outside answered with a sound so terrible, it rattled dust from the ceiling. We thought we were going to die. We thought Ethan was already gone. But the truth is, that night, in that house, something far older than any of us woke up. And it wasn't just hungry. It was searching for him. If you've ever lived in a small southern town, you know the nights can stretch longer than time itself. Long, heavy, and filled with things folks prefer not to talk about while the sun is still up. I grew up in a place like that, Willow Creek, Arkansas, a town stitched together with catfish ponds, weathered barns, and front porches that sag under the weight of stories no one wants to tell twice. And from the day I can remember, I lived with my grandmother, Grandma Mae. My parents, well, like everyone else in our family, they'd moved to the city, Little Rock, chasing jobs and chasing life. They came home only on holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the occasional summer if work allowed. But for me, my life was Grandma, the old wooden house, the oak tree out front, and the strange quiet that settled over the land after sundown. And in that quiet, there were stories. Stories about spirits, ancestors, restless souls, and those caught somewhere between this world and the next. But one story, this story, wasn't just something told on a humid July night. It was something I lived through. Something that shook the bones of our family. Something I still hear in my head when the wind crosses the field just right. That year was strange from the start. I was busy preparing for my exams, and Grandma Mae, who had always been sturdy as a hickory trunk, was suddenly weaker, slower, more sensitive to the cold drafts that seeped in from the wetlands. We stayed home that year. No trip to Little Rock. A small decision, but one that opened the door to everything that followed. One afternoon, as the sun melted behind the fields and the air turned the color of burnt amber, the phone rang. I picked up. It was Uncle David, my grandmother's fourth son. His voice, usually calm, confident, had a tremble I'd never heard before. Mae, it's about Ben. Uncle Ben, the seventh child. Quiet, gentle, the kind of man who kept to himself but never caused trouble. David explained that Ben had been acting strangely. Not just quiet anymore. Silent, detached, barely speaking to co-workers at the catfish processing plant. He'd show up for 3 or 4 days, then disappear. Return again, broke, exhausted, confused, unable to explain where he'd been or what he'd done. Grandma didn't interrupt. She listened with her eyes half closed, like she was feeling something in the air, something the rest of us couldn't sense. You see, Grandma Mae had once been a spiritual medium. Not the flashy kind you see on TV. No. She practiced the old Southern tradition, tied to ancestral reverence and the hush-hush rituals nobody talks about outside the family. But as she got older, she stopped helping people. She used to tell me, "Child, once you open that door, you can't always choose what walks through." And in that moment, I saw it in her face. The door had cracked open again. She told David to check on Ben immediately. An hour later, the phone rang again. This time, David was crying. "May." He tried to hang himself. My whole body froze. Grandma didn't speak for 2 long seconds. Then she asked what happened. David had gone to Ben's small room at the boarding house. Called his name again and again. No answer. The door was locked from the inside, but the old wood paneling near the frame had a gap in it, a slit. David peered through and saw Ben standing on a chair, a rope around his neck, the loose end tied to a ceiling beam. David screamed for help. Neighbors rushed in. They broke down the door, cut the rope, pulled Ben down just in time. An hour later, Ben woke up, but he didn't remember a thing. Not the rope, not the days he'd vanished, not even the why. Grandma shut her eyes and pressed her fingers to her lips. Then she whispered, "Bring him home. Bring him to Willow Creek. Don't wait." David drove Ben back the next morning. I remember standing on the porch, wiping my hands on my jeans nervously as their truck pulled in. Ben stepped out first, his skin pale, eyes hollow, like he'd left pieces of himself scattered along the highway. But before I could greet him, he vanished. Not ran, not ducked away. He simply wasn't there anymore. I spun around, heart pounding, and then something made me look up into the branches of the great oak tree in our yard, the tree that had stood long before our house was built, and would probably stand long after. And there, high above, sat Ben, perched like something feral, head tilted, a twisted grin across his face. Eyes, not his eyes, something else staring through them. Neighbors heard me scream and gathered around the tree. They begged him to come down, but he didn't move, didn't blink, just stared and smiled that awful smile, until Grandma stepped outside. She didn't shout, didn't plead. She simply stared up and said, gently, "Ben, come down, child." And amazingly, he did. Slowly, mechanically, like someone or something was tugging invisible strings. Inside, Ben sat cross-legged on the wooden floor. His body twitched occasionally, eyes darting around like he was tracking shadows none of us could see. Grandma watched him for a long time. Then she said, "He's not alone." A chill crawled up my spine. Grandma brought out 3 herbal incense sticks, the kind she used only to call upon our family's spirit guide. She lit them. Smoke curled upward, twisting through the dim room like fingers searching for something. And then, her posture changed. Her voice deepened. Her very presence shifted. The spirit guide had arrived. It confronted the thing inside Ben. But the presence inside him laughed, mocked, refused to speak, until the spirit guide pressed the burning incense close to Ben's back. Ben convulsed. His face drained of color, and a voice, not his own, began to speak. He said he had lived in the room next to Ben years ago. Said he died alone, an unexpected stroke in the bathroom. No one found him for days. No one cared. And from that moment, he followed Ben, clung to him, liked his energy, wanted him, wanted to take him with him. And that, listener, was only the beginning. The room felt smaller after the spirit spoke, like the walls had leaned in, listening. Ben sat hunched forward, his breathing uneven. But it wasn't really Ben breathing. It was that thing inside him. Something lonely, angry, and desperate enough to cling to the first warm soul it found after death. Grandma Mae's face tightened, and though the spirit guide still moved through her, I could sense her, somewhere behind her own eyes, watching, calculating, afraid in a way she didn't want me to see. The presence in Ben kept talking. His voice trembled, not like fear, but like a cold man laughing at a funeral he didn't want to leave. I died there, he said. In that room. Bathroom floor. Couldn't move. Couldn't cry out. His lips curved into a twisted half-smile. You don't realize how long a body stays warm after the soul steps out, until it happens to you. He chuckled. And the sound, it didn't belong in the living world. The spirit guide, speaking through Grandma, cut him off sharply. You should have gone home, the guide said. Your people would have received you. Why attach yourself to this boy? Ben's head tilted like a puppet's. No one came for me, he whispered. No one remembered me. So I remembered him. Little Ben, with the quiet steps and soft energy. I like him. I want him with me. Thunder grumbled outside, rolling over Willow Creek like an omen. I felt the air change, thick, cold, heavy. The hairs on my arms stood straight. The spirit guide's voice grew firmer. You will choose, it commanded. Either you return to your family, where their altar waits for you, or you come with me, and I will bring you to the mountain where souls learn to walk upward. The presence inside Ben hissed, a wet, angry sound. I don't want to leave, it said. I don't want ascent. I don't want a path. I want him. The lamp beside us flickered. Ben's fingernails dug into the wooden floor, scraping harshly. Grandma's breath slowed as the spirit guide pressed forward, the incense smoke curling like hooks pulling truth from shadow. What is your name? The guide asked. The presence hesitated. Then, slowly, reluctantly, gave it. A name that sounded like it belonged to a man who died without friends, without neighbors who remembered his laugh, without anyone to light a candle after he was gone. The spirit guide nodded, then said, We will call your family. Grandma, or the guide within her, told me to fetch the old phone book from the kitchen cabinet, the one with dog-eared pages and faded pencil marks. My hands shook as I brought it over. The guide flipped pages rapidly, far faster than Grandma ever could, fingers moving with a precision that wasn't human. Finally, it stopped at a name matching the one the spirit had given. We dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. A man picked up. We explained who we were, asked about the deceased man, asked about the family altar, the ancestral rites, the burial. There was a pause on the other end. Then the man said, I think you must have the wrong person. Everything you said, none of it is right. My brother is alive. He lives in Mobile, Alabama. He's got 3 kids. Grandma's eyelids fluttered. The guide inside her stiffened. You're sure? it asked. "Sure as sunrise," the man said. "I just spoke with him 2 days ago." The guide hung up without a word, and slowly, very slowly, turned its gaze to Ben. "You lied." The temperature in the room dropped so suddenly my breath fogged. Ben's body jerked. The spirit inside him snarled like a cornered animal. "You won't take him," it spat. "He's mine. He followed me. He fits me." The spirit guide slammed its palm onto the floor, and the entire house shuddered, timbers groaning as though an invisible weight pressed downward. "You do not own the living." The voice wasn't human anymore. It echoed, layered, ancient, furious. Ben screamed, high, sharp, inhuman. The incense smoke thickened into something denser, swirling around Ben like a storm of gray feathers. The spirit fought it, shrieking through Ben's throat. His fingers clawed at the air. His legs spasmed, kicking. His head snapped backward, eyes rolling white. The guide pressed harder. "You will choose," it repeated. "Now." The presence shrieked. Then, silence. The kind that makes your ears ring from its emptiness. Ben collapsed like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Grandma slumped forward, breath trembling as the spirit guide receded from her body. For a moment, all I could hear was the storm outside pressing against the walls. Grandma wiped sweat from her forehead and whispered, "He won't go. He's hiding." Ben's chest rose and fell rapidly, but his eyes were closed. Grandma reached for my hand, cold, trembling, and whispered, "He's clever. More clever than most. He won't leave unless we force him. Tomorrow, the spirit guide will come again. Tonight, we keep watch." That night, Willow Creek felt wrong. The wind sounded like whispers threading through the leaves. Shadows on the porch stretched longer than they should. Every creak of the old house sounded like a footstep belonging to someone who'd died in another man's bathroom. Ben remained unconscious, lying on the old sofa. Grandma sat beside him, holding a bowl of cleansing herbs, murmuring prayers older than Arkansas itself. I watched from the rocking chair. Every so often, I'd see Ben's fingers twitch, or his lips move like he was mouthing words silently, or his chest rise a little too sharply, as though someone inside him was gasping for air they didn't deserve. Around midnight, Grandma whispered, "He's still here. He's watching us through Ben's eyes, even while Ben sleeps." She turned toward me. Tomorrow, he chooses, one way or another. But we didn't know, not yet, that the spirit had no intention of choosing anything. It wanted to stay, wanted to root itself deeper, wanted to make sure that by sunrise, Ben would never be free. And as the storm outside cracked open the sky, I felt something shift in the dark. Something listening, something smiling, something waiting for morning. By the time Claire pulled the truck into Grandma Mae's yard, the old farmhouse looked like a lone skeleton standing beneath a sky smeared with black clouds. The porch light flickered, not steadily, but in a slow, pulsing rhythm, as if the house itself was breathing. "Don't leave the truck off," Jake whispered. "I don't want the engine dying out here." Claire didn't answer. Her hands were trembling too hard around the steering wheel. Ethan stared through the window at Mae's house, quiet, unmoving, yet somehow aware of them. Grandma Mae stepped out onto the porch before they even opened the doors. She wasn't wearing her usual housecoat. Tonight, she wore a faded black dress that hung to her ankles, something old, older than Claire had ever seen in photographs of her youth. Around her neck dangled a silver charm etched with tiny symbols so worn they looked like ghosts of letters. "You came," Mae said softly. Not surprised, not alarmed, simply stating a fact she'd known long before the truck arrived. Jake swallowed. "Grandma, something followed us." Mae closed her eyes, exhaled. "I know." The porch boards creaked as she motioned them inside. "Quickly now. No looking back. Whatever crawled out of those woods wants you to look. If you do," she pressed a finger to her lips, "it'll think you're inviting it closer." Claire grabbed Ethan's hand. Jake grabbed the duffel bag of candles, salt, and the worn Bible Mae told him to find in her closet last year, just in case. At the time he'd rolled his eyes. Now, every page suddenly felt heavier than scripture should. They hurried inside. Mae shut the door behind them with a decisive click. And for a moment, silence. Thick, expectant. Then, scratches along the siding. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails made of bone dragging across the wood. Ethan clung to Claire. Jake felt his pulse hammer in his throat. Mae didn't flinch. She locked the bolt, then turned with eyes that seemed darker than the house around them. "Whatever happened tonight? Tell me from the beginning." Jake took a breath. His voice cracked when he started explaining the figure in the cotton fields, the way the shadows moved, how Ethan's voice wasn't always his own. Claire jumped in when Jake stumbled, adding details she'd been too afraid to say earlier, like the way the living room lights dimmed when Ethan's breath fogged in front of his mouth, inside a warm house. Mae listened without interrupting, her fingers tracing slow, looping circles on the wooden table. When they finished, she nodded once. Hum. Then she said the one thing Jake didn't want to hear. It got a piece of Ethan. Not enough to take him, but enough to know his name. Jake's stomach dropped. Claire held Ethan tighter. "Grandma," Claire whispered. "What is it?" Mae hesitated. That alone was terrifying. "I ain't sure which kind," she said finally. "But I can tell you this, whatever's sittin' out in those woods ain't lookin' for a home. It's lookin' for a host." Jake felt cold. Ethan shivered even though the house was warm. Mae motioned toward the living room. "Bring the boy. We got work to do, and not much time to do it." They followed her into the dim, lantern-lit room. Mae had placed 3 chairs in a circle, one for herself, one for Claire, and one, directly opposite the windows, for Ethan. Jake stood behind his brother, refusing to sit. Mae opened a wooden box from beneath the coffee table. Inside lay bundles of sage, worn cards with painted symbols, and an old brass bell whose handle had been polished smooth by decades of hands. Claire's voice trembled. "Grandma, is this an exorcism?" Mae shook her head. "Nah, baby. This ain't exorcising." She placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "This is Callan. We're calling it out, making it speak its name. Once it does, then we can deal with it." Jake whispered, "And if it won't speak?" Mae's face didn't change. "It'll try to lie. It'll try to scream. It'll try to break the windows and scratch the walls and make you think it's already inside." She met Jake's eyes. "But you don't move. Not 1 inch. Hear me?" Jake nodded, even though his chest felt like it was collapsing inward. Mae lit the sage. Smoke curled upward in thin gray ribbons, twisting in the lantern light like something alive. "Close your eyes," she commanded. Jake did. So did Claire. Mae began chanting, soft at first, the words rolling off her tongue in a rhythm older than hymnals, older than English. Ethan breathed slowly, then faster. Then, the temperature dropped. Not a little. Not like a draft. It plummeted. Jake exhaled, and his breath came out white. Claire shivered violently, clutching her arms. Mae continued chanting, louder now, her voice low and vibrating the floorboards. The lantern flickered. The walls groaned. Ethan's small hands gripped the chair. And then, he whispered something. Not in English. Not in any language Jake recognized. A spiral of cold rushed through the room. Claire gasped. Mae's eyes snapped open. "That ain't him talkin'. Keep your eyes shut." But Jake couldn't. He opened them, just a sliver, and immediately wished he hadn't. Ethan's head was tilted toward the window, not looking at Mae, not looking at Claire, not looking at Jake, but at the window, the one facing the cotton fields, where something stood. Not outside the yard, not at the tree line, right. The glass. Jake's breath hitched. Its outline was wrong. Too tall, too thin, its limbs bending in angles that made no sense. And its face. It didn't have one. Just a blur of shifting darkness, like a smudged charcoal sketch trying to form features and failing. The thing lifted a hand, slowly, deliberately, and pressed it against the window. The glass shook. Mae's bell rang by itself, fast, frantic, high-pitched. Mae shouted, "Don't look at it." But it was too late. Ethan opened his eyes. They were pitch black. Every lantern in the house blew out at once. Boom. Total darkness. Claire screamed. Jake grabbed Ethan, feeling his skin ice cold. The windows rattled like something was pounding on them with both fists. Mae shouted over the chaos, "It knows we're here. Don't let go of him." Jake held Ethan tighter. Ethan's voice tore out of him, deeper than a child's throat should allow, warping the air around it. "Let me in." Mae slammed the brass bell on the floor. "No," she roared. "You got no claim here." The pounding stopped. Everything froze. For one terrifying second, the house went dead silent. Then the thing outside whispered, clear enough for all of them to hear, "Not yet." A long, splintering crack ran down the window pane. Jake didn't breathe. Claire didn't either. Mae finally spoke, voice shaking for the first time. "We bought ourselves time. That's all." She looked at Ethan, still unconscious in Jake's arms. "That thing out there ain't done, and it ain't leaving." She stared toward the window, "until it gets what it came for." The crack in the window seemed to glow faintly, like a vein of ice running down the glass. Jake stared at it as if it might crawl farther, slithering its way across the pane to burst inward. Ethan lay limp in his arms, breathing shallow, skin still unnaturally cold. Claire pressed a shaking hand over her mouth. "Grandma, what now? What does it want with him?" Mae didn't answer right away. She lit the lantern again, her hands steady, but her eyes betraying something Jake had never seen in her before. Fear. Mae set the lantern on the table and knelt in front of Ethan. Her voice softened, gentle, trembling, almost motherly. "Baby, if you can hear me in there, you hold on, all right? Just hold on." Ethan didn't move. Jake swallowed hard. "Grandma, you said it got a piece of him. But how do we get it back?" Mae stood slowly, back stiff, jaw clenched. "That thing ain't just lurkin'. It ain't wanderin'. It's tied to something old. Something that's been waitin' a long time to find a boy who can see what he saw tonight." Claire's voice cracked. "You mean he opened something?" Mae turned her gaze to the window. "He woke something that wasn't meant to wake." Lightning flashed outside, silent, white, slicing the cotton fields into rows of stark shadows. For a split second Jake thought he saw a tall figure standing among the stalks. When the darkness returned, the figure was gone. Mae took a long breath. "Get him to the back room. Now. We can't do what we need to do here. Not with that thing watching us through the windows." Claire hesitated. "Is the back room safer?" "No," Mae said bluntly. "But it remembers more than the rest of this house does." Jake didn't want to know what that meant. But he carried Ethan anyway. The hallway to the back room felt colder than the living room. The walls looked darker, as though the shadows clung to them. The closer they got, the more Jake felt the sense of being watched. Not by the creature outside, by the house. Mae pushed the door open. The room smelled of cedar, dust, and something older, like dried herbs and rain-soaked earth. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of stones, bundles of dried roots, and old wooden talismans carved with spirals. Jake had always hated this room. As a kid, he'd refused to step foot inside it. Mae had told him, "Some rooms ain't for playin', boy. Some rooms remember things." Tonight, the air felt thick with those memories. Mae directed Jake to lay Ethan on the narrow bed. Claire sat beside him, stroking his hair, whispering through quivering breaths. Mae rummaged through an old chest and pulled out a small box wrapped in faded cloth. "What's that?" Jake asked. Mae didn't answer until she'd set it carefully on the table and unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a string of black beads, a silver key, and a small glass jar filled with dark soil. Claire frowned. "That's dirt." Mae nodded. "From the graveyard behind the old church." Jake stiffened. "I thought you said nobody goes near that place anymore." "Nobody alive does," Mae muttered. She picked up the beads, whispered a prayer that didn't sound Christian at all, then hung them over Ethan's chest. The beads twitched, just a little, almost as if responding to Ethan's heartbeat. Jake stepped back involuntarily. Mae placed the jar of soil at the foot of the bed, then held up the silver key between two fingers. Its surface was tarnished, the shape strange, too long, the teeth jagged and uneven. Claire asked, "What does it open?" Mae hesitated. Then, "It opens a memory. One that ain't mine, and ain't yours. But one that monster outside knows real well." Jake felt the room tilt. "Grandma, I don't understand. What are you saying?" Mae finally looked at him, eyes tired, haunted. "That thing ain't new, Jake. Things like that don't just appear. They're born from something old, something forgotten. And this house," she tapped the wall, "was built on ground that ain't as empty as folks think." A low, slow creak sounded from the floorboards. Claire froze. "Grandma, Please tell me that was just the house settlin'. Mae didn't blink. It ain't settlin'. The creak came again, longer this time, closer to a groan. The lantern dimmed, flickered, then steadied. Mae stepped to the center of the room and placed the silver key on the floorboards. She knelt beside it, mumbling under her breath. "Mae," Jake whispered. She lifted a finger to silence him. Then, the key turned, by itself. On the floor, Jake stumbled backward. Claire gasped, covering Ethan instinctively. The wooden planks beneath the key began to darken, lines spreading outward like veins soaking up water. The room vibrated with a deep hum, a sound that felt like it came from underground. Mae's voice sharpened. "Hold him. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, don't let him go." Jake rushed to the bedside. Claire clutched Ethan's hand, tears streaking her cheeks. The hum grew louder. The floorboards began shifting, bowing inward as if something beneath them was pushing up or breathing. Then a voice rose from the floor. Not loud, not angry, whispering. A child's whisper. Jake froze. Claire choked on a sob. Mae didn't look up as she whispered, "It ain't a child. Don't listen to it." But the whisper grew louder, clearer. "Come back. Come find me. Come play." Claire covered her ears. "Stop, stop, please stop." The lantern sputtered, and with a sharp crack, it went out. Darkness swallowed the room, but not empty darkness. This darkness moved. Something brushed against Jake's arm. He jerked away. Something brushed Claire's hair. She whimpered. Something cold wrapped around Ethan's ankle. Mae shouted, "Don't let go." But Jake couldn't see. He couldn't see anything. Only the whispering, right beside his ear now, soft as breath, cold as the grave. Then, Ethan arched upward on the bed, his back bending unnaturally, his mouth opening in a silent scream. Jake grabbed him. Claire held his hand so tight her knuckles whitened. Mae slammed her palm on the floor. "Show yourself." The darkness recoiled, like a living thing slapped across the face. Then, a figure rose from the floorboards. Not the creature from the field. Something else. Smaller, human-shaped, flickering like smoke. A boy. A boy no older than 10. Eyes hollow, skin pale as dust, mouth sewn shut with thin black thread. Claire screamed. Jake nearly dropped Ethan. The boy reached toward the bed, toward Ethan, fingers trembling, desperate. Mae's voice cracked like a whip. "You ain't talking him." The boy jerked as if pulled backward by an invisible hook, then vanished into the floor in a burst of cold air. Silence crashed over the room. Jake collapsed to his knees. Claire sobbed into Ethan's shoulder. Mae sat trembling, staring at the floor where the boy had disappeared. "Grandma," Jake whispered through shaking breaths. "What was that?" Mae answered with a voice that sounded smaller than he'd ever heard. "One of many." She looked toward the cracked window at the far end of the house. "And the one outside," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "That's the one looking for all the others." Oh. She turned toward Jake and Claire, her face pale. "And it ain't done yet." The house felt different now, like each wall was listening, holding its breath, waiting for something only it understood. Jake stood beside Ethan's bed, heart still pounding from what they'd seen in the back room. Claire hovered near the door, arms wrapped around herself, as if afraid her bones might shake loose. Grandma Mae didn't move for a long time. She sat on the floor, staring at the place where the ghostly boy vanished, her breath steady but shallow. The lantern's fading glow left her face carved in deep shadows, older than Jake had ever seen her. Finally, she spoke. "He wasn't after Ethan," she murmured. Jake frowned. "What? Then why did he touch him? Why did he try to pull him?" Mae shook her head slowly. "That boy was runnin'. Hidin'. And Ethan, he's the only living soul in this house who can hear both worlds at the same time." Jake felt Claire shift behind him. "You're saying that child, he was afraid?" Mae didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood with effort, bones popping, breath wheezing slightly, and walked toward the window. The crack in the glass had spread deeper, farther, thicker, almost like something had run its fingertips down the inside. "Grandma?" Jake asked softly. Mae placed 2 fingers against the glass. "Whatever took that boy, whatever stitched his mouth shut, that's what's outside now. That's what's waiting in the dark for Ethan, and for every lost soul that's ever tried to escape it." Lightning flashed, and this time they all saw it. A figure, tall, crooked, bent at impossible angles, lurking between the rows of cotton outside. Not moving, not breathing, just watching the house, watching them. Claire backed away from the window with a strangled gasp. Jake swallowed hard. "Grandma, what the hell is that thing?" Mae's voice broke into a cold whisper. "A collector." The word seemed to warp the air around it. Heavy, ancient, something whispered around old fires and passed down through families that never put it to paper. Jake shivered. "Collector of what?" Mae didn't answer. Jake suddenly wished he hadn't asked. Instead, she walked to the bedside and placed her palm over Ethan's forehead. The beads she'd draped earlier were now warm, almost hot, pulsing with a faint, dull glow. Claire watched with wide, wet eyes. "He's getting worse, isn't he?" Mae nodded. "He's fading. He's in 2 places now, here, and wherever that creature pulled him toward." Jake felt a rush of helplessness. "Then tell us what to do. There's gotta be something." Mae inhaled slowly through her nose, then exhaled with a tremble. "There is." She stepped back, grabbed the silver key from where it had fallen after the summoning, and held it tightly. "We gotta open the place where it hides." "The place," Claire whispered. "What place?" "The memory beneath this house. The one it keeps coming back for." Mae pointed to the floorboards. "The reason it won't leave Ethan alone." Jake felt cold sweat run down his back. "You're talking about opening that hole again?" Mae shook her head. "No, that wasn't the hole. That was just the breath of it." Her eyes darkened. "We're gonna open the real one." Claire whispered. "Grandma, please, no." But Mae was already kneeling, pressing the key to the floor. This time, she didn't whisper. She chanted, low, deep, rhythmic, like the rumble of thunder rolling through the earth. The air thickened, the lantern dimmed, and the floor began to split. Not like a crack, like an eye-opening. Dark, swirling air rose from the gap, cold, old, carrying a faint echo of children crying, laughing, screaming. Claire pressed her back to the wall. Jake, close it, make her stop." Jake couldn't move. He wanted to. He tried to. But something about the air felt like fingers were wrapped around his ankles, his ribs, his throat. Mae pressed her palm to the widening opening. "Show your true form," she commanded, voice amplified with something not entirely human. The shadows in the room quivered, like they were alive, listening. And then, a shape crawled up from the opening. Not the tall collector. Not the ghost boy. Something in between. Small arms. Small legs. A body hunched and trembling. Another child. Mouth sewn shut. Eyes full of terror. And it wasn't looking at them. It was looking over their shoulders. At the window. The creature outside. The collector was coming. The window cracked further with a brittle, sharp shriek. Claire screamed. Jake grabbed the bedpost to steady himself. Mae shouted over the rising wind, "We're out of time." She grabbed a handful of graveyard soil and flung it across the gap. The soil hissed like acid when it hit the air. The collector's shadow loomed against the window, stretching its long, crooked arms across the glass. The house groaned under the weight of its presence. Mae's eyes blazed. "Jake, put your hand on the boy." Jake lunged, pressing his palm to Ethan's chest. "Claire, hold his head still." Claire obeyed, sobbing openly now. Mae pressed the key into the child spirit's tiny, shaking hands. The stitched mouth moved, trying to speak, trying to warn them, but all that came out was a horrible wet choke. Mae closed her eyes. "I free you," she whispered. "I free all of you." Every jar on the shelves shattered. The lantern blew out. The darkness pulsed, once, twice, and then burst upward like a geyser. The collector shrieked from outside, a sound that rattled the windows and shook dust from the rafters. And then, it was gone. The darkness collapsed inward. The cracks sealed. The spirits faded like smoke. The house fell silent. Jake gasped for breath. Claire crumpled to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. Mae swayed where she stood, then collapsed to her knees, exhausted. Jake rushed to her. "Grandma, Grandma, are you okay?" She nodded weakly. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." Claire scrambled to Ethan's side and let out a cry. His eyes had opened, bright, clear, alive. "Ethan," she whispered. He blinked slowly. "Mom." "Dad." A faint smile touched his lips. "I had the worst dream." Claire broke down, hugging him tight. Jake released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Mae looked up, her face pale but relieved. "It's over," she said softly. "The collector won't bother him again." But as she stood, leaning on Jake's arm, she whispered something only he could hear. "Collectors come in threes." Jake froze. Mae squeezed his hand gently. "We stopped one tonight," she whispered. "But there are 2 more out there. 2 more hunting for what they lost." Her eyes drifted to the window. "And they know this house now." The wind outside picked up. Something creaked on the porch, soft, rhythmic, like footsteps. Mae shut her eyes. "This ain't the end, baby," she murmured. "Just the beginning."